Let's make banana bread, but vegan. Okay, this is actually a really simple recipe. You want to get a large bowl. I'm going to take 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1/2 cup of applesauce. This is actually those little cups of applesauce. They are pretty much a 1/2 cup, so that works out really well. Then I'm going to start breaking up my bananas, and we're going to be using 4 bananas. I know you're supposed to use overripe. I don't have overripe. I have just, bananas. And then I want to get in there with a fork and mash those bananas up. You want to basically make it into a paste. If you want to use a mixer to do this, no problem, but don't use the mixer once we start adding flour, because then, gluten forms, bad things happen. Before I get too far into that, let me show you one thing that's going to help this a lot too. Traditionally, banana bread has eggs in it. We're not going to use an egg, so instead I'm going to be making a flax egg, which means I have 2 tablespoons of flaxseed and 5 tablespoons of water. And I'm just going to, now this is freshly ground flaxseed, by the way. You want to grind it just before you use it. It keeps the most of the nutrients and everything like that in it. And I'm just going to mix that up. And this will form into like a gel. It's sort of, it almost resembles an egg, sort of, kind of. But it does actually work remarkably like one in baking. So once that's mixed, I'm just going to set it to the side. Back to our mashed bananas. I do find it easier to mash them up with the presence of the sugar and the applesauce. It just seems to make it a little bit easier. It's kind of like when you used to cream eggs and sugar together. Same idea. Okay, once it looks like your bananas are mashed up pretty good, just, one last quick check to make sure. Next, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of non-dairy milk. This happens to be unsweetened soy milk. Has a nice richness to it that I like in baked goods. For a little extra, I like to add a teaspoon of vanilla. For some lift and rise, 1 teaspoon of baking soda. This is optional, but baked goods really work well with a little bit of salt. So I have 1 teaspoon of salt. I want to mix all that together. Up to this point, like I said, you could use a mixer. Beyond this point, you do not want to use a mixer because you will activate the gluten and it'll make for a little bit of a tougher bread. So you definitely don't want to do that. And here's our flax egg. As you can see, it's starting to gel, probably needs a few more minutes. Okay, after a few more minutes, our flax egg is looking a lot more like a gel than it was before. So let's dump that right in. Usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes. I want to mix that around. And last but not least is 2.5 cups of whole wheat flour. That's right, this is a whole wheat recipe. And once that's in, this is when you do not want to use your mixer. You want to just get it wet at this point. So I'm mixing very carefully. You don't want to stir it all up and really make a mess. You want to just get everything put together. In other words, only stir as much as you need to. What you really don't want is seeing anything dry. It should all be homogeneous. Now at this point, some people like to add nuts to their banana bread. I am not some people, but if you choose to add nuts, go right ahead and go nuts. Now I'll set this to the side for a moment and get out our baking dish. I happen to like this earthenware one. As you can tell, I've had it for a long time. It is made by the Pampered Chef. I don't even know if they're still available, but if they are, there'll be a link to this in the video description. To prepare the pan for baking, I have my handy dandy sprayer of oil, and I'm just going to put a light coating on the bottom of the pan. You don't want to go up the sides, because if you do, it can prevent rising of the bread. Now, the hardest thing you have to do, hold the bowl and get that dough all into that pan. Dough, it's a batter. It's not really even a dough. One thing that I might not have mentioned is preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Just like to make sure I get it all. Once it's in the pan, shake it around a little bit, see if it'll self-level. If not, you can always use the spatula and spread it around. This one seemed to work pretty well. So now into the oven, 375 degrees for 1 hour and 15 minutes. And once the hour and 15 minutes is up, you have something that looks like this. Beautiful, huh? Before it cools, I like to get a spatula and run around the sides to separate it from that pan. Black gloves are optional, but you want some sort of heat protection for your hands. Then I'm going to just pop it out of this pan. Hopefully it comes out. Oh, beautiful. And I'll just set it down for a moment. Get yourself some kind of a cookie rack, a cooling rack of some type, and set your banana bread on top of it. Let that cool for about an hour before you try cutting into it. And now It's time to cut. Oh, look at that. And I'm just going to cut off a nice slice. And here we have it. It's really nice and moist. It's still quite hot. I didn't let this sit the full hour, but wow, look at that. And let me just tear off a little bit. Oh, it's very hot. As always, you gotta take a taste. This is every bit as good as the banana breads I used to make in the before times. Ways to store this. I do not ever put bread in the refrigerator. Wrap it up in parchment paper and plastic wrap, and you can keep it on the counter for several days before it starts to go stale. I usually toss them in the microwave for about 10 seconds per slice just to heat it up a little bit. You can freeze these as well, and then just leave it sitting out to defrost for a little while, usually a couple hours, several hours maybe, and then it's as good as the day you made it. But these don't usually last long enough to get frozen in this house. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. See you next time on The Bistro.